Land transfer tax is one of the most significant closing costs buyers incur when purchasing property in Ontario, and this can be especially surprising for first-time buyers. Now, working as a real estate lawyer and dealing with first-time home buyers on a daily basis, I can tell you that this is the number that catches them off guard. So if you're buying your first home in Ontario, there are rebates available that put money back in your pocket, but only if you qualify. In this video, we'll be breaking down exactly what those rebates are, what you need to qualify, and what the numbers actually look like. My name is Soccio-Marandola. I'm a lawyer here in Toronto, and I help people like you close real estate deals every single day. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure you subscribe and join our community. And if you have a closing coming up, we've built the most transparent legal fee calculator online. It gives you a full breakdown of every dollar you'll spend and even calculates closing costs like land transfer tax and title insurance. That's linked in the description down below. So what is land transfer tax? Let's start with the basics. In Ontario, every time a property changes hands, the buyer pays a tax to the province. That's land transfer tax. The seller doesn't pay it, the buyer does. And it comes due on closing day. It gets paid at the time of registration. Now, it's not a flat percentage. It's calculated on a tiered scale based on your purchase price. Think of it like income tax brackets. Different portions of the price are taxed at different rates. The higher the purchase price, the more you're going to pay. And for most buyers in today's market, it adds up to a significant number. But as a first-time home buyer, you are eligible for a rebate on that land transfer tax. So let's talk about that. So who qualifies for the rebate? Now, in order to qualify for a first-time home buyer land transfer tax rebate, there are 4 main criteria and you need to meet all of them. So first, you must be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident of Canada. Second, you must be at least 18 years old. Third, and most importantly, you must have never owned a property anywhere in the world at any time. So if you own property in a different province or a different country, you would not be eligible to receive the rebate. And it doesn't matter how you came to own it. If you're gifted the property or if you inherited one, that still counts. Any prior ownership in property anywhere in the world disqualifies you. Fourth, and lastly, you must intend to occupy the property as your principal residence within 9 months of closing. So you can't use this to buy an investment property. Now, those are the 4 criteria. But one of the questions I get often is, what if there are 2 buyers on title? Well, it gets a little more nuanced. So if you're buying with someone else and only you qualify for the rebate, it's proportionate to your proportionate share that you're buying in the property. So if you each own 50%, you as the qualifying buyer can claim 50% of the maximum rebate. The rebate follows the ownership interest, but this applies only to non-spouses. It works very differently when the 2 buyers are spouses. And the spousal rule is one I want to spend a little bit of time on because it's the one that catches most people off guard. So for the purposes of land transfer tax, it's not just about whether you've previously owned a home, it's also about whether your spouse has. So the key phrase is this: your spouse cannot have owned a home while he or she was your spouse. While they were your spouse, that timing is everything. So let me walk you through 2 scenarios. Scenario 1, your spouse owned a home during your relationship as spouses. So even if they sold it before you're buying this new property together, in that case, neither of you qualify. The rebate is gone entirely. And it doesn't matter whose name the property goes in or whose name the property previously was in. Since you're a spouse and your spouse owned property while they were your spouse, you've lost your eligibility. Now, scenario 2, let's say your spouse owned a home and sold it before you became spouses. In that case, you still qualify. And here's the part that surprises people. You can still claim the full rebate on both your interest and your spouse's interest, up to the full maximum. So you can both be on title, and in a sense, your spouse gets the benefit again, despite prior ownership. It's a nuance that most people, and even some professionals, don't know about. So if you're in that situation, flag it to your lawyer early so it gets documented correctly at closing. Now, the other question I get when it comes to this information is what qualifies as spouses. So a spouse under the Land Transfer Tax Act takes its definition directly from Section 29 of the Family Law Act in Ontario. So that definition covers 3 categories. So you have married couples, couples who have cohabitated continuously for more than 3 years, so common law, and couples who have lived together in a relationship of some permanence and have a child together. So all of that qualifies as spouses, and therefore the spousal rules will apply. So now let's talk about numbers. What do you actually get back from this rebate? So a common misconception is that if you're a first-time home buyer, then you don't pay any land transfer tax, and that's incorrect. The rebate has a cap on it, and in most cases, with today's market prices, first-time homebuyers will probably still pay land transfer tax. The maximum provincial rebate is $4,000, and it's applied as a credit at closing. It's not a check that arrives weeks later, despite the term rebate. So your lawyer handles it at the time of registration. You don't receive a separate payment, you just see a reduced amount on closing. Now, at a purchase price of approximately $368,000, the $4,000 rebate covers your entire provincial land transfer tax. You would owe nothing. Above that price point, you receive the full $4,000 rebate, but you still owe the difference. So the higher the purchase price, the more that comes out of pocket, even with the rebate. Now, if you're buying in Toronto specifically, there's something you need to know. Toronto is the only municipality in Ontario with its own land transfer tax. It's called the Municipal Land Transfer Tax. Same trigger as the provincial one, and for most purchase prices, it's the same tax calculation. So if you're buying in Toronto, you're paying land transfer tax twice, provincial and municipal, on the same purchase price. Now again, some consolation for first-time homebuyers, there's a separate municipal rebate of up to $4,475, and both rebates can be stacked. So if you qualify, you're claiming the provincial and the Toronto rebate at the same time. Now let's look at the actual numbers using 3 different common purchase prices. So if we're dealing with property that's outside of Toronto, and we're just dealing with the provincial land transfer tax, this is what we'll be dealing with at these 3 different price points. So at $600,000, your provincial land transfer tax would be $8,475. Now, applying the first-time homebuyer rebate of $4,000, your net land transfer tax owing would be $4,475. At a purchase price of $900,000, your gross provincial land transfer tax would be $14,475, and then applying the full maximum rebate, your net land transfer tax owing would be $10,475. At $1.2 million, you'd be looking at $20,475 in land transfer tax. After the rebate, that nets out to $16,475. Now, when we're dealing with property in Toronto, this calculation, or your total land transfer tax, changes. So at a purchase price of $600,000, you're paying $8,475 in provincial land transfer tax, and that same amount in Toronto or municipal land transfer tax. So your combined gross land transfer tax is $16,950 on a $600,000 purchase in Toronto. Now again, you get to apply both rebates, so the maximum provincial rebate of $4,000 and the maximum municipal rebate of $4,475. So your net land transfer tax owing would be $8,475. At $900,000, your combined gross land transfer tax would be $28,950, and after the land transfer tax rebates, that would come down to $20,475. At $1.2 million, you would be looking at $40,950, and after the land transfer tax rebate, that comes down to $32,475. And that's the reality of buying in Toronto as a first-time buyer. Even with both rebates stacked, those net numbers are significant. And without the rebates, if you don't qualify, you're looking at the combined gross column, so every single dollar. This is why land transfer tax is the number that catches most people off guard. It's not a small line item. At $900,000 in Toronto, you're looking at over $20,000 in land transfer tax, even after both rebates. That's real money, and it's due on the closing day. All right, so now you know what land transfer tax actually is, what you need to qualify for the rebate, how the spousal rules work, and what the numbers actually look like at different price points, both inside and outside of Toronto. This is one of those closing costs that surprises a lot of first-time buyers, but if you're watching this before you purchase, you're ahead of it. If you're enjoying these behind-the-scenes real estate law videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I post a new video every week. And if you're a realtor, I also send a weekly update about different legal situations that come up in our closings. That's our realtor newsletter, and you can subscribe to it with the link down in the description. Thanks for watching.